The morning Earth changed forever began like any other at the Global Defense Command Center. Captain James Walker stood at the observation deck, sipping his black coffee while watching the sunrise paint the sky in brilliant orange hues. Little did he know that humanity's place in the universe was about to shift dramatically. The first sign came as a series of unusual readings on the long-range sensors. Initially, the technicians dismissed it as a glitch, but when dozens of massive objects suddenly appeared in high Earth orbit, everyone realized this was anything but a malfunction. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission," announced Lieutenant Brown, his fingers dancing across the control panel. It's not in any language we know." Before Walker could respond, every screen in the command center lit up with the image of a tall, silver-skinned being. Its large eyes seemed to glow with an inner light, and when it spoke, its words were somehow perfectly understood by everyone present. "People of Earth," the being said, "I am High Counselor Vex of the Galactic Council. Your species has reached the threshold of interstellar capability. We have come to evaluate your civilization for potential membership." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of diplomatic meetings and technological demonstrations. The Council sent a delegation to Earth, and Earth hastily assembled its own diplomatic team. Captain Walker, with his calm demeanor and strategic mind, was chosen to lead the military aspect of these discussions. The problems began during the weapons inspection. The Council representatives, particularly the militant Dorn species with their metallic scales and imposing height, couldn't contain their amusement when shown Earth's military capabilities. "You still use chemical propellants." One Dorn officer laughed, picking up a standard-issue rifle. "How quaint. We abandoned such primitive weapons thousands of years ago." Walker kept his face neutral, though his jaw tightened slightly. "Our weapons have served us well," he said simply. The Dorn officer waved his hand dismissively. "Observe," he said, activating a small device on his wrist. A beam of pure energy shot out, cutting through a steel target like it was paper. "This is real weapons technology. Energy-based, clean, precise. No primitive explosions, no messy projectiles." The other council members nodded in agreement, their expressions ranging from amusement to pity. They showed off their own weapons: plasma rifles, particle beam emitters, and force field generators that could stop anything their sensors could detect. Later that day, during the council's private deliberations, Walker stood outside the meeting room with Elder Tor, one of the few council members who hadn't openly mocked Earth's technology. The elderly alien belonging to the ancient architect species studied Walker with eyes that seemed to hold centuries of wisdom. "They underestimate you," Elder Tor said quietly. "They forget that different paths can lead to the same destination." Before Walker could respond, the doors opened. High Counselor Vex emerged, flanked by other council members. His expression was one of benign superiority as he delivered the council's decision. "Earth will be granted provisional membership," Vex announced. "However, given your technological limitations, you will be restricted from participating in Council military operations. This is for your own protection, of course." Walker noticed how some council members barely contained their smirks. The Dorn representatives didn't even try, openly chuckling at the primitive humans and their antiquated weapons. As the council members departed in their ships, sleek vessels that seemed to bend light around them, Walker stood again at the observation deck. Elder Tor's words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that the council's arrogance might one day prove costly. "Sir," Lieutenant Brown approached him. "What do you think about their decision?" Walker watched the alien ships vanish into the darkness of space. "I think," he said slowly, "that they might learn there's more than one way to fight a battle. Let them laugh for now." He didn't know then how prophetic those words would prove to be. As the sun set on humanity's first day as part of a larger galactic community, the wheels of fate were already in motion. Soon, the galaxy would learn that sometimes the old ways, the simple ways, were simple for a reason. They worked. 3 months after Earth joined the Galactic Council, Captain Walker found himself aboard the Council's massive space station. He stood before a giant holographic display showing the galaxy's outer territories, his eyes fixed on the red dots marking recent pirate attacks. "Another trade ship lost in Sector 7, reported Officer Reed, pushing her tablet across the meeting table. "Third one this week. Same story. Their energy shields failed completely against the attackers." Walker studied the attack patterns while other species representatives argued around him. The Dorn commander, as usual, dominated the discussion with his loud voice and dismissive attitude toward human input. "These are simply better pirates," the Dorn commander said, waving away concerns. "Our energy weapons will handle them, just as they have handled every threat for the past 1,000 years. But Walker saw something different in the data. These weren't random attacks. The pirates struck with military precision, always hitting specific targets, always using the same unusual tactics that somehow bypassed the Council's advanced shields. During a break in the meeting, Walker approached Elder Tor, who stood quietly observing the star map. "The attacks follow a pattern," Walker said, pointing to several locations. "They're testing defenses, learning our response times. This isn't simple piracy." Elder Tor's ancient eyes studied the map. "Few others see what you see, Captain Walker. Fewer still would dare suggest the Council's defenses might be vulnerable." He paused, then added softly, "Perhaps because they have forgotten what it means to face a truly new threat." Walker tried presenting his findings to the Council, but the reaction was predictable. High Counselor Vex barely looked up from his data pad during the presentation. "Captain Walker," Vex said, his tone dripping with condescension, "while we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm, please leave military matters to species with actual experience in galactic warfare." The Dorn commander laughed openly. "What next? Shall we take advice on ship design from a species that still uses combustion engines?" But that night, as Walker reviewed the latest attack reports in his quarters, something caught his eye. He called Officer Reed immediately. "Look at these sensor readings," he said, pointing to a graph on his screen. Every ship that survived an attack reported the same thing. Their energy shields didn't just fail, they never registered the attacks at all. As if whatever hit them wasn't energy-based at all. Reed finished, her eyes widening. The next morning, Walker received an urgent message from Earth. A small research outpost on Jupiter's moon Europa had detected something massive moving through the outer solar system. The object vanished before they could get clear readings, but its signature matched nothing in the Council's database. Walker tried one last time to warn the Council. During an emergency session, he stood before the gathered representatives, his voice firm despite their dismissive looks. "These aren't just pirates," he insisted. "They're scouts. They're using weapons we don't understand, technologies that make our best defenses useless. We need to prepare." "Enough." The Dorn commander slammed his fist on the table. "We will not waste time on human paranoia. Our fleets are the most powerful in known space. Our weapons technology is beyond your comprehension. We have defended this galaxy for millennia." As the Council members nodded in agreement, Walker noticed Elder Tor watching the star map again. More red dots had appeared, forming a clear pattern now, one that looked disturbingly like an invasion route. Back in his quarters, Walker received a private message from Elder Tor. "The Council forgets that the greatest dangers often come from what we refuse to see. Keep watching, Captain. Keep preparing. I fear you will be proven right sooner than anyone expects." Walker stared out his window at the endless expanse of space. Somewhere out there, something was coming. Something that could slip past the Council's best defenses like they weren't even there. And despite all their advanced technology, despite their thousands of years of space warfare experience, the Council wasn't ready. But maybe, just maybe, humanity's primitive weapons would prove more useful than anyone expected. The real question was, would anyone listen before it was too late? The day the Shadowborn revealed themselves, the Galactic Council's arrogance shattered like glass. Captain Walker was in the Council's war room when the first reports arrived. The massive holographic display showed a Council border world, Proxima Delta, under attack. But these weren't pirates. The attacking ships were massive dark vessels that seemed to absorb light itself. Energy weapons having no effect, came the desperate transmission. Shields air. The message cut off in static. Within hours, 3 more worlds fell. The Council's mighty warships, armed with their advanced energy weapons, might as well have been throwing stones at a mountain. Their beams simply vanished into the dark hulls of the Shadowborn ships without leaving a mark. High Counselor Vex had lost his usual superior attitude. His silver skin had turned a pale gray as report after report came in. "Impossible," he whispered. "Our weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy." "The Shadowborn don't seem to care about that," Walker said quietly, watching another defensive line collapse on the display. The Dorn commander, who had laughed at Earth's weapons just months ago, now paced the room like a caged animal. His mighty battle fleet, pride of the Council forces, had just been scattered like leaves in a storm. 20,000 years of weapon development, he growled. 20,000 years of perfecting energy-based combat. How can they simply ignore it all? Elder Tor stood beside Walker, both watching the disaster unfold. "They used something older," the ancient alien said. "Something we forgot about long ago in our rush to advance. Their shields don't stop physical objects. They don't need to. No one has used physical weapons in so long." Walker's communicator buzzed. It was Officer Reed. "Sir, you need to see this." She sent a video feed to his tablet. It showed a small Earth observation post near one of the fallen worlds. As he watched, a Shadowborn scout ship approached it. The humans on board, armed with their primitive rifles, opened fire. Simple bullets propelled by simple gunpowder. The Shadowborn ship's advanced shields didn't even flicker because they weren't designed to stop physical objects at all. The rounds pierced the dark hull. The scout ship exploded. "Get me Earth Command," Walker said urgently. "Now." But before he could relay his discovery, the war room erupted in chaos. New signals appeared on the display. Hundreds of them. The Shadowborn had launched a full-scale invasion. "Multiple fleets detected," shouted a sensor operator. "They're bypassing all our major defense systems." The Council members watched in horror as their carefully constructed defensive network proved useless. Energy shields failed. Plasma weapons dissipated harmlessly. Particle beams vanished into the dark hulls without effect. "We need to evacuate," Vex announced, his voice shaking. "We must abandon the outer worlds and fall back to our core systems." "You can't just abandon those worlds," Walker protested. "There are billions of people out there." "We have no choice," the Dorn commander roared. "Our weapons are useless. Our ships are falling. What would you have us do, human? Fight them with your primitive projectile weapons?" Walker met his gaze steadily. "Yes." The room fell silent. Elder Tor stepped forward, his ancient eyes gleaming. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "it is time we remembered that new is not always better. Sometimes, the old ways persist because they work." On the display, another Council world went dark. But in the corner of the screen, that tiny Earth observation post still stood, its simple kinetic weapons having proven more effective than all the Council's advanced technology. Walker looked at the assembled Council members. "You laughed at our weapons," he said quietly. "You called them primitive, obsolete. But right now, they're the only things that have managed to hurt these invaders." The Council members looked at each other, their previous arrogance replaced by desperate hope. "Tell us more," High Counselor Vex said simply. But Walker knew it might already be too late. The Shadowborn were coming, and the galaxy's most advanced civilization had forgotten the simple solutions that might have saved them. Sometimes, progress means remembering what you left behind. The Council's emergency chamber had never been so quiet. Captain Walker stood before the gathered representatives, but this time no one was laughing. Admiral Mary Thompson stood beside him, her white uniform crisp despite the 36 hours they'd spent preparing this presentation. "Ladies, gentlemen, and honored members of all species," Admiral Thompson began, her voice steady. "The Shadowborn have taken 12 worlds in 6 days. At this rate, they'll reach the core systems within a month." The Dorn commander, who had once mocked Earth's military, now sat slumped in his chair. His mighty fleet was reduced to scattered remnants. "What can Earth possibly offer now?" he asked, but the mockery in his voice had been replaced by desperation. Walker nodded to Officer Reed, who activated the holographic display. The image showed a human railgun, its design simple yet elegant. "This is the Mark VI heavy railgun," Walker explained. "It fires a 20-kilogram tungsten rod at 15 kilometers per second. No energy shields, no plasma fields, just pure kinetic force." He played the video from their recent weapons test. The railgun fired, its projectile punching straight through a salvaged piece of Shadowborn hull material. The council members leaned forward, their eyes wide. "But that's not all," Admiral Thompson continued. She showed them designs for coil guns, traditional firearms scaled up for space combat, and kinetic bomb launchers. "We've been developing these since we first learned about the Council's reliance on energy weapons, not because we thought they were better, but because we believed in having options." "Primitive weapons," High Counselor Vex whispered, but now he said it with hope rather than scorn. Elder Tor stood up slowly. "Sometimes the greatest innovations come from remembering what others have forgotten. The Shadowborn built their defenses against energy weapons because that's all they've faced for thousands of years. They never expected to face physical projectiles again." Walker brought up more test results. "We've modified these designs for space warfare. They're simple to manufacture, easy to maintain, and most importantly, they'd work. Earth's factories can begin production immediately." The council members whispered among themselves. Admiral Thompson waited patiently, knowing what would come next. "The cost," one representative began. "The cost of not acting is higher," Walker cut in. "We've lost 12 worlds already. How many more will fall while we debate?" High Counselor Vex raised his hand for silence. "You understand what you're asking. To abandon millennia of weapon development. To retool our entire military-industrial complex." "No," Admiral Thompson said firmly. "We're not asking you to abandon anything. We're asking you to adapt, to add these weapons to your arsenal. The Shadowborn think they figured out everything about how this galaxy fights. Let's show them how wrong they are." Walker activated one final display. "The designs for a hybrid weapon system. We can mount kinetic weapons alongside your energy weapons. Get the best of both worlds. But we need to act now." The chamber erupted in discussion. Walker watched as the council members argued, but he could see it in their eyes. They knew this was their best chance. Elder Tor moved to the center of the chamber, his ancient voice cutting through the noise. "I have lived long enough to see empires rise and fall. Often, they fall because they believe their way is the only way. Today, we have a choice. Adapt or perish." High Counselor Vex stood slowly. The chamber fell silent. "Earth has shown us something we have forgotten," he said. "That strength comes not from having the most advanced weapons, but from having the right weapons." He turned to Walker and Admiral Thompson. "How quickly can we begin?" Admiral Thompson smiled. "Our factories are already retooling. We can have the first shipment of weapons ready in 72 hours. As the council chamber broke into urgent action, Walker felt Elder Tor's hand on his shoulder. "Now comes the hard part," the ancient alien said softly. Walker nodded. They had convinced the council, but the real test was still to come. Would these primitive weapons be enough to turn the tide? They were about to find out. The colony world of New Terra wasn't supposed to be the turning point of the war. It was a small farming world, barely 10 years old, with only basic defenses. But fate had other plans. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of the Earth Defense Force ship Thunderchild, watching as his crew mounted the newly manufactured railguns alongside the ship's standard weapons. They had finished just in time. Long-range sensors had detected a Shadowborn fleet approaching. 3 heavy cruisers and 6 escort ships. Officer Reed reported, her eyes fixed on the tactical display. Standard Shadowborn attack formation. Walker nodded. The Shadowborn had become predictable in their victories. Why change tactics when nothing could hurt you? All hands to battle stations, he ordered. Load the kinetic weapons. Power up the rail systems. The Shadowborn ships emerged from faster-than-light travel like dark stars, their black hulls seeming to bend light around them. Walker remembered how terrifying they had looked the first time he saw them. Now he just saw targets. They're broadcasting their usual message, Reed said. Surrender or be destroyed. Walker allowed himself a small smile. Let's give them our answer. Fire the first salvo. The Thunder Child shuddered as its railguns fired. Streams of tungsten rods, each weighing 20 kilograms and moving at 15 kilometers per second, streaked across space. The Shadowborn ships didn't even try to dodge. Why should they? Nothing had hurt them before. The rods slammed into the lead cruiser. Its advanced shields, designed to stop energy weapons, might as well have been missed. The projectiles tore through the dark hull, leaving gaping holes. Secondary explosions bloomed across the ship's surface. Direct hits, Reed shouted. Enemy ship showing severe damage. The Shadowborn escorts broke formation, clearly confused by this unexpected development. Their return fire, streams of dark energy, splashed harmlessly against the Thunder Child's shields. Launch fighters, Walker commanded. Earth's space fighters, hastily equipped with oversized autocannons, streamed from the launch bays. They looked primitive compared to the sleek Shadowborn ships, but primitive was exactly what they needed to be. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for generations to come. The Shadowborn, for the first time, faced an enemy their defenses couldn't stop. Simple bullets from fighter-mounted guns tore through their hull plating. Railgun shots from the Thunder Child reduced their mighty cruisers to floating wrecks. Enemy fleet is retreating, Reed announced. The bridge crew cheered as the remaining Shadowborn ships fled back into faster-than-light travel. Walker immediately sent the battle data to the Council. Within hours, the recording spread across Council space. The unbeatable enemy had been beaten, and by the very weapons they had once mocked. The Dorn commander, watching from a nearby system, sent a simple message. We were wrong. How soon can you arm our ships? In the following days, as Walker oversaw repairs to his ship, he received visitors from dozens of Council worlds. Species that had looked down on primitive human technology now came asking for help, bringing their ships to be fitted with kinetic weapons. Elder Tor arrived personally to inspect the Thunder Child. You've given the galaxy something it desperately needed, the ancient alien said, running his hand along one of the railgun barrels. Not just weapons, but hope. The Shadowborn aren't invincible, Walker replied. They just made the same mistake the Council did. They thought newer always meant better. As they stood in the ship's hangar, watching crews load fresh ammunition into fighters, Elder Tor smiled. The Council laughed at human guns, he said, until they fired. Walker nodded. They're not laughing anymore, but we need to move quickly. The Shadowborn will adapt, try new tactics. We have to press our advantage while we have it. A signal came through on his communicator. More Shadowborn fleets had been detected moving toward Council space. But this time, they would be ready. This time, they had the right weapons for the job. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways, and the galaxy was about to learn that lesson the hard way. The massive factory complex on Earth's moon had once made cars and farming equipment. Now it produced railguns and coilgun ammunition around the clock. Captain Walker watched through the observation window as another shipment of weapons left for the front lines. Production is up 300%, Admiral Thompson said, standing beside him. Every factory on Earth is working at full capacity. Even the Council worlds are converting their energy weapon facilities to make kinetic weapons. The past month had changed everything. After the victory at New Terra, The Council had fully embraced human weapon designs. Ships that once carried only energy weapons now bristled with railguns and missile launchers. The Dorn commander sent another thank you message. Officer Reed reported, checking her tablet. His fleet destroyed 2 Shadowborn battle groups yesterday. Said the look on their faces was priceless when the bullets started flying. Walker allowed himself a small smile. The same commander who had once laughed at human weapons now couldn't praise them enough. A holographic display showed the current state of the war. The red dots marking Shadowborn-controlled systems were finally decreasing. Blue markers showed liberated worlds, growing more numerous each day. They're adapting, Walker noted, pointing to recent battle reports. Starting to add physical armor to their ships. Trying to counter our weapons. Let them try, Admiral Thompson said firmly. We've got more surprises ready. She brought up designs for new weapons, massive shotgun-style weapons for space combat, electromagnetic pulse generators combined with kinetic strikes, and simple but effective space mines. Elder Tor arrived for the daily briefing, his ancient eyes bright with enthusiasm. The Council's military engineers are working with human designers now, he reported. They're combining our advanced targeting systems with your kinetic weapons. The results are impressive. The meeting was interrupted by an urgent message. A Shadowborn fleet had been detected heading toward a heavily populated Council world. But this time, there was no panic, no fear. Task Force 7 is nearby, Officer Reed reported. 3 Council ships and 2 Earth vessels, all equipped with the new hybrid weapons. They watched on the tactical display as the battle unfolded. The Council ships, once helpless against Shadowborn technology, now fought with deadly efficiency. Railguns punched through shields while upgraded energy weapons took advantage of the hull breaches. Earth ships provided covering fire with massive spreads of conventional missiles. The Shadowborn fleet retreated after losing half their ships. Another victory, Elder Tor said softly. But more importantly, a victory won together. Walker nodded. The Council and Earth forces had learned to work as one. Energy weapons and kinetic strikes. Advanced targeting and simple projectiles. The best of both worlds. Later that day, in the factory control room, Walker watched as the first batch of hybrid weapons rolled off the production line. They were beautiful in their way. Sleek Council technology merged with sturdy human engineering. The Shadowborn are pulling back to their core systems, Admiral Thompson reported. Intelligence suggests they're trying to develop countermeasures against kinetic weapons. But it'll take time they don't have. And we're not sitting still either, Walker added. Already, human and Council engineers were developing new weapons, new tactics. A group of Dorn engineers walked past, discussing ammunition designs with human experts. Once they had mocked Earth's technology. Now they worked side by side with humans, learning and teaching in equal measure. The Council forgot something important, Elder Tor said, watching the cooperation with satisfaction. True strength comes not from having the most advanced weapons, but from being willing to use any weapon that works, from being willing to learn from others. The tactical display updated again. Another Shadowborn fleet defeated. Another world liberated. We're pushing them back, Officer Reed reported. The combined fleets are ready for the next phase. Walker looked at the battle plans for the coming offensive. The galaxy had changed. The Council had changed. And somewhere out there, the Shadowborn were about to learn that sometimes the old ways, combined with the new, were the deadliest of all. The final battle was coming. And this time, they were ready for it. The Shadowborn home system loomed ahead, a massive black hole at its center surrounded by dark worlds and defense stations. The combined fleet of Earth and Council ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at its edge. Captain Walker stood on the bridge of his flagship, now named Vindication, as the final battle approached. All ships reporting ready, Officer Reed announced. Council forces in position, Earth squadrons standing by. The fleet was the largest ever assembled. 500 Council ships and 300 Earth vessels, all armed with the hybrid weapons that had turned the tide of war. The Dorn commander's voice came over the comm system. "Never thought I'd say this," he said, "but I'm glad to have human weapons on my side today." The Shadowborn had gathered their remaining forces to defend their home. Their ships now sported thick physical armor, a desperate attempt to counter the kinetic weapons that had broken their advance. But they had learned these lessons too late. "Enemy fleet detected," Reed reported. "They're launching everything they have." Walker nodded to Admiral Thompson, who stood beside him. "Send the signal. Begin the attack." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries. The combined fleet moved in perfect coordination, Council energy weapons creating gaps in the Shadowborn armor that Earth's kinetic weapons exploited. Railgun shots and plasma beams crossed the void together. "First defense line breached," Reed called out. "They're falling back to their inner planets." The Shadowborn fought desperately, but they faced weapons they couldn't counter and tactics they'd never seen. Human ingenuity combined with Council technology proved unstoppable. Elder Tor's ship provided tactical support, its advanced sensors guiding the fleet's shots. "They never imagined," he commented, "that their greatest defeat would come from the weapons they mocked." The battle reached its peak above the Shadowborn throne world. Their last fleet formed up for a final stand. But this time, everyone knew how this would end. "All ships, fire at will," Walker commanded. The space between the fleets filled with fire. Railgun rounds punched through shields. Missiles found their marks. Council energy weapons, perfectly timed, struck through the holes torn by kinetic impacts. The mighty Shadowborn ships, once thought invincible, fell one by one. "They're sending a surrender signal," Reeve announced, her voice tight with emotion. The bridge fell silent. After all the worlds lost, all the lives taken, it was ending. Victory had come not through superior technology alone, but through the combination of old and new, simple and advanced. High Counselor Vex's voice came over the fleet-wide channel. "To all ships, stand down. Accept their surrender." As the Shadowborn leadership was taken into custody, Walker walked the halls of their captured command center with Elder Tor and the Dorn commander. The mighty race that had nearly conquered the galaxy had been defeated by the very weapons they'd dismissed as primitive. "The Council meets tomorrow," Elder Tor said, "to formally recognize Earth as a full member with all rights and privileges, including military leadership." The Dorn commander nodded. "We've learned our lesson about underestimating others, about thinking our way is the only way." Back on the Vindication, Walker watched as recovery ships began the work of rebuilding. The war was over, but its lessons would live on. "We're receiving messages from across Council space," Reed reported, smiling. "They're celebrating everywhere. Earth weapons are being called the saviors of the galaxy." Walker thought back to that first meeting, when the Council had laughed at human technology. How quickly things had changed. Admiral Thompson joined him at the observation window. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Walker said, watching Council and Earth ships working side by side, "we build something better. Not by forgetting the old or blindly chasing the new, but by learning from each other. By remembering that progress doesn't always mean abandoning what works." The stars stretched out before them, no longer threatening, but full of promise. The galaxy had learned its lesson. Sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Sometimes the simple solution was the right solution. And sometimes those who laugh first laugh last. The Council had laughed at human guns until they fired. They weren't laughing anymore. They were learning instead.